Hi everyone, so I just wanted to do a part 2 to this entire China bank run problem that is developing in real time as we are speaking. So I do understand that in my first part of the video, when I was expressing my perspective and my opinion, there's been quite a lot of backlash and it can be seen as something quote-unquote controversial. So I just honestly wanted to have a very frank chat in terms of sharing my opinion and whether people want to cancel me, censor me, whatever, I don't really care. To be very frank, as an international viewer specifically, I don't live in the US, I don't live in China. But however, I'm situated in somewhere that is on the eastern bloc of the world. And you can say that I have Eastern values, you can say that I'm westernized because I speak English, etc. It doesn't matter. I believe that as a platform, it's for us to express our opinions and to let the best ideas float up to the top. And I would believe that in terms of my previous commentary, some of you might feel like I'm a little bit emotionally charged. Because the interesting thing is, there's always this quote. History doesn't often repeat itself, but they usually rhyme. And this kind of bank runs, fraud, and people getting greedy, etc., it's part of human nature, which is why harmful and malicious actors will always exploit the weakest link. And my perception, of course, there are many implications, whether the regulators will want to build them out, who are we going to hold them accountable for, and what is the proper procedure of settling a lot of all these fraud cases, scam cases, etc. These are extremely complex problems, by the way. I don't think it's an easy, okay, let's conduct an investigation, 1 week later, let's close the thing off and let's settle it. If the government wishes to bail everyone out, yay, everybody is happy. And then it fits and manifests into a perpetual loop that people think, hey, the government is going to bail us out anyway. Of course, I could have been a little bit more hedged in terms of my commentary, and I accept that fact because I do realize that that previous video was one of my most disliked video on my YouTube career thus far. I'm gonna take it, but especially when we're talking about such sensitive issues, I kind of already expected the kind of controversy, and it's perfectly fine with me. It's a free world and you can do whatever you want to. So the entire purpose and objective of this video, which is a part 2, is to provide more color and to provide more perspective, especially for those of you who haven't really been following this entire issue. Oh, and post-editing, this will be the second and also the last time I'll be talking about this bank run, unless there is substantial development from here on and how it will affect the entire property market, stock market, financials market in China, etc. If not, I think I've said whatever I want to say. I've given my peace of mind, and my YouTube channel ultimately is still about stocks, how to invest and stuff like that, so I wouldn't be commenting too much. I just felt the need to follow up, and as I can see, there's a lot of people that are misconstruing what are my opinions and what are the facts. So yeah, let's get back into the video. So the funny thing is, I think social media's algorithm is incredible. They probably picked up my heightened interest in terms of following this entire China bank run problem. And I came across this Twitter account, Li Qianren. I don't want to butcher her name. I'm not too sure which tone is her name. I don't know, is it Li Qian, or whatever. So I'll call her Miss Ren. And this is her accolades. I'm not going to go through the credentials of her as well, but I thought that a lot of her pieces and Twitter threads are quite insightful and provides a lot more nuances in some of the discussions. So let's get right into what she has to say. So Li Qian said, this China village / town banks fraud / run news was underreported and complex. Now it is more like 8 banks in this situation, and several fintech platforms like Baidu, Xiaomi, 360 also part of it. I will try to explain the details. And when you have more and more players and this sort of institutions involved, and even like private or public institutions involved, it starts to trigger people's spidey sense. Whether is this problem a very big problem, is this an inherent structural problem, etc. And we'll definitely be covering that in the later part of this video. And she posted this tweet thread on the 25th of May, so that's some time back already. Essentially, some bank officials used fintech platforms / bank apps to take online deposits, but money didn't get into bank's balance, but a joint company with cash flow problems now. Depositors thought they were depositing money in the bank. So this problem is two-pronged. Number one, why are depositors under the assumption or impression that they are depositing into a bank? If that's really that assumption, that presumption that we have set for the context of the thing, then yeah, I would believe that regulators or whoever that is supposed to enforce such dealings and the operations in the day-to-day, they should be held accountable, because why are they allowed for something like that to happen? And if there are essence or if there are ingredients of fraud, then yes, I would believe that depositors are supposed to be compensated fairly. However, if the depositors are already under the impression that they're investing, they're getting into a certain sort of scheme, I don't care whether it's staking or putting into a high yield interest savings account that gives you like what, 8-10%, then I think such incidents should be viewed on a case-by-case basis. And the second problem is this. Why are bank officials using fintech platforms to collect deposits, but the money don't go into the bank's balance and get rerouted somewhere else? Is this how the entire situation should be? I would presume not, but there are probably some illegal dealings behind the scenes. And these sort of people, the middleman essentially, has to be held accountable. So among the online depositors looking for extra 1.85% interest rate, many are from Chiatian, so it's big news there. Some details are amazing as they just put $6 million or $20 million money in, thinking it's banks. So basically, based on ground research, they are claiming that those who use the bank because of its marginally high interest rate of 1.85%. Honestly, if you touch yourself and you touch your heart and you ask yourself, hey, the big four banks are probably promising me like what? If they consider themselves marginally high interest rate, I think the range is around 1% to 1.5%. And then a local bank or a rural bank comes over and tell you that, hey, I'm offering you 0.35% higher. Put it with me. And I'm not too sure what's the credibility of all these different rural banks. I'm not going to cast aspersions because let the investigations carry on. We really don't know what's happening thus far. Let the central government step in, let the regulators step in. But back to the scenario where I'm a rural bank, where let's say you are living in the US. I'm a Californian bank. You have your big banks out there, your JP Morgan, your Goldman Sachs, and I'm a new player in the industry. I'm a Californian bank and I only have my empire in California. And I offer you a 0.35% higher interest rate. Would you take it up? I don't know, but personally for me, I don't think I would take it up. Why would I not trust, or why would I place higher emphasis in just getting that quote-unquote marginally high interest rates when I know that in China there are the four big banks, your ICBC, your ABC, your CCB, etc. For those of you who don't know, those are all acronyms of the big four China banks. And just risk the amount of money that to put in and basically sink your entire net worth, which is like 6 million, 20 million. These are not small figures, by the way. So here comes the problem. There's this article from Yichai Global saying that, or even asserting that, hey, some of the rural banks or local county banks are attracting savers with rates at around 5% a year. So there are many different accounts in what are the interest rates that are being offered. And I'm not too sure whether people or the victims that are involved in this entire fraud and this scamming case, were they being upfront when they are giving their online reports, etc. But however, I would just like to clarify and just to hedge my position here, saying that if they're under the assumption that they're just depositing their money, they're not buying any forms of investment products, they're not going to give you higher interest because of some funny dealings and operations behind the scenes. If this kind of risks are not disclosed and it's the bank officials or people behind the scenes that are manipulating a lot of these movements, then yes, in fact, I believe that there are safeguards to protect people like them, especially for those rural banks that have bank licenses and they are insured under the FDIC equivalent, etc. However, just a caveat, if they did put a signature somewhere, somehow, into committing into something, whether is it a financial product, whether is it a derivative, whether is it something else to promise them high returns, etc., then there comes the tricky problem, and I'll just leave it at that. So the total money involved is 40 billion yuan, very much smaller than Evergrande, but there are 4,000 small banks with possible shady stuff. For now, the provinces involved, Henan and Anhui, are under pressure to solve problems. So bad for depositors. PBOC and central government typically want to wash themselves off responsibility until forced to. Even the line is very thin. So these depositors are indeed dealing with some actual bank officials who are misleading them using official bank app to take money. And yes, if under the preface and nuance of misleading, misguidance, exploitations, then sure, so be it. I believe regulators should step in and take people to account, hold people accountable, especially all these bank officials or whoever. But I'd just like to say that in China, specifically, they have this very big problem. In Chinese, it's called 官僚主义. And in English, if I were to do a direct translation via Google Translate, it's called bureaucracy. And even Singapore's Prime Minister did express his opinion that China has this very big problem. What do I mean by bureaucracy? Essentially, a lot of all these county officials, provinces officials, or even mayor, if you like to call it, if they have the ability to shield things or to cover things in their own province or in their own county, they will shield it from the Beijing government. So from the Beijing government's perspective, they don't know things will happen until things blow out of proportion and until people storm to WeChat, people storm to Weibo and blow the entire thing out of proportion. That's when the central government, or that's when the a lot of all the central regulators will have to step in, because it had became a big problem. So a lot of all these things that are happening in the day-to-day operations, etc., a lot of people like to blame, the central government is not doing their thing, the CCP is corrupted. A lot of people like to blame like Chairman Xi, like to blame the entire party, etc. I'll just like to inform you guys that under the CCP, they have 100 million members. And in China, there are 1.4 billion population. Even if I do agree to your assertion that, hey, Chairman Xi has absolute power at the top, where he can control every single aspect of life of the Chinese citizens in China, he doesn't have the capacity, he doesn't have the bandwidth, he doesn't have the time to go through every single county, to micromanage, and to make sure that everybody does their job right. Simple as that. And I do concur to the fact that, hey, a lot of all this structure, a lot of all these laws being passed, it has to get better. And it's definitely a wake-up call to so many things that's been transpiring over the last 2 years. All your tech conglomerates that are not following rules and regulations, the Evergrande thing, or the property bubble, however you guys like to call it, and now even this kind of bank run, all these are considered quote-unquote political failures, and it doesn't cause into confidence into the CCP. And I would definitely sincerely hope that a lot of the people in high governance or people in the official posting, high posting, are definitely looking into it. And also allegations of people in power exploiting their position, exploiting their authority. Because it's true, and it's the practical enlightenment that is happening in China today on the ground. So I do look forward to things turning for the better, but it's a little bit naive to bluff ourselves that, hey, China will turn better overnight and within a snap of the fingers. Everything is done, rule of law is there, constitution is up, people follow everything that is set out, even by the central government. If you can see, a lot of all these scams and a lot of all this layering in terms of the operations, people clearly just disregard whatever the central government has to say. And that's a very big problem. If you're going to run a huge country that is poised to take over the US, this kind of standard, I can tell you, forget it. Anyway, how much fintech firms need to take responsibility in this possible bank run/fraud is another uncertainty. Clearly, the headlines do not look good for their risk management, as they are the middleman in funneling money. Journalists dug up Baba's asset auction platform, showing some related assets on sales from involved shareholders of the banks. Could be a sign the provinces are behind the scene in trying to see how much assets they could raise first, then plug the hole. It's unlikely to be systemic, but another non-trivial financial risk as bad economy is going to show who's been swimming naked in China fast. So I just wanted to provide some perspective on how systemic or how inherent or how big this risk is to this entire system. 40 billion yuan, if you were to do a conversion today, it's around 5.95 billion United States dollar. So I did a quick Google search. I wanted to see who are the largest banks globally as of December 2021 based on asset value. And to no one's surprise, the first 4 banks, which is like I said, the big 4 banks in China, ICBC, CCB, ABC, and Bank of China. These are denominated in trillions of US dollars, by the way. So ICBC has $5.54 trillion in assets managed, 4.76, 4.58, 4.21. Even if you were to reflect back into what Evergrande is doing, Evergrande probably has around $300 billion in debt, United States dollar. So if you were to convert 5 billion versus 300 billion versus the trillions of dollars in the banks. But considering the facts, Evergrande is not a standalone problem. It implicates the entire industry, it implicates many of the contributors like suppliers, upstream, downstream, whatever. So it's a lot more systemic compared to something like that. So like I said, going back to the scenario again, if I was somebody in China today, I really have no clue why would I want to take up such a huge amount of risk, especially when a lot of all this digital infrastructure in China is quite well established already. It's not as if like people will still have to withdraw money, and it's not as if like people don't trust the government, assuming that the government will take away their money or whether their money will depreciate to a large extent. This is not the real context of China today. A lot of people, everybody uses QR code. They use WeChat Pay, they use Alipay, and like I said in my previous video, for the 4 big banks, I will wager a bet saying that even if they were to go quote-unquote bankrupt or if they experience cash flow problems, they will not stop withdrawals because the government will probably go all the way. And for this kind of thing to be happening in China today, especially in such sensitive times, it's a political embarrassment and somebody's head will be rolling. Whether is it scapegoat or not, somebody's head will be rolling. Now, pivoting over to the mismanagement of this protest, essentially, there is an allegation against the local government about how they changed the health code of people so that they prevent them from protesting or assembling and whatnot. If somebody in the local government did exploit the entire system to ensure that people don't turn up for protests, then this is just incredibly disgusting. And it's a clear exploit of power and how corrupted the entire local government operations is. And somebody has to take accountable for it. Now, pivoting over to the violence that happened during the protests, I just wanted to set the entire backdrop of my own position, because it feels like a lot of people are misconstruing my position and how I view things. So first layer, I strictly condemn disappropriate use of violence and essentially ganging up just because from security details, from the military, from the police force, whatever. However, I do understand from the perspective in terms of managing peace and managing harmony. And when many of these kind of protests actually develop over time, it gets more and more violent. It essentially goes down the slippery slope and you don't know who's the one that started, and then you start attributing blame, whether is it to the police, to the security details, to the protesters, whatever. At the end of the day, this will be a he say, she say game. So I don't want to make a value judgment there. But I do qualify that using disproportionate amount of violence to try to silence this protester, I strictly condemn this kind of situation. A lot of international viewers, especially from one specific country, has been expressing a lot of opinions fervently and enthusiastically in a situation that is happening in real time when a lot of the facts are not being reviewed and laid out to the public, and many people are just making assumptions after assumptions. So I actually learned something after living on this earth for the last 24 years. There are always two sides of a story, and let's not get too ahead of ourselves, thinking that we are always the correct one, we are on the correct side of things, and whatever we say is always correct. I think when you get into that frame of thinking, that's when people get arrogant, people start dishing out opinions with no regards to whatever the other party has said. For point number 3, many people have been asserting that, China has no freedom of speech, people can't protest, they are trying to silence all these people and they are trying to cover this thing up. Firstly, I completely disagree in that assessment. Secondly, if people are really that afraid, they wouldn't even be taking it up to the streets and they wouldn't be protesting. That's just my own opinion. And where does this opinion come from? For those of you who don't know, there's this sunny island called Singapore. We are located in Southeast Asia. We can't just assemble for a cause. We can't get up and riot. You need a permit to kind of hold assemblies. And to prove my point, somebody was charged for holding up a smiley face sign in Singapore. Go look it up if you haven't already. So I'm not here to pass a value judgment on how things should be run in other countries. I'm not in the business of trying to meddle other countries' affairs. But there is a certain conduct and there is a certain standard of procedures in every single country. And we should all ought to respect that. And if the citizens are really that afraid of the government, they wouldn't even be taking it to the street. I think that's just a food for thought for those of you who are interested. And for the last part, I just wanted to go through a quick Twitter thread from Xiaomi again. So there's a few nuances to understand the Henan County Bank protests. The protest banners point to Henan government and party secretary, but they are protesting at PBOC's Zhengzhou branch. This location choice is very relevant to the case. The protesters used English banners and used Chinese banners to openly call out the party secretary by name, hung Mao's portrait and chanted for President Xi to investigate Henan government. All these tactics are meant to show it's not against the central government. Even though I can assure you that from whatever that I've consumed, a lot of the content online, they're just framing it in a way and they're just framing and just continuously pushing out this narrative that CCP is this, CCP is that, Chairman Xi is this, Chairman Xi is that. Just stay skeptical to a lot of all this narrative building, and of course including my content. Don't take whatever I say as a gospel truth. Look at it from a logical point of view and you make your own assessment. I believe that you guys are not sheeps, don't need a shepherd to teach you how to think. So the local government used plain clothes to suppress the protests. Highly censored, only in private chat groups people got news of it. This was the depositors' 4th protest. Likely continue until central and local government reach agreement who pays how much share. So, which is why I did call out in my previous video, I don't know why the local government, or like I said, I don't know which agency, I don't want to assert and I don't want to make a conclusion of who actually contracted all these so-called security details to help ensure there's peace and stability there. And currently, I'm more interested into understanding what is the proper protocols and procedures when a protest do happen. Do they call the police? Do they report to the central government? Do they report to a reporting entity and to get certain directions from somebody? Or does the local government get to do whatever they want to? And maybe from the local government's perspective, if they're able to cover this protest, like how they cover the intentional switching of the health code problem, then like I said, somebody's head must roll. So the protest location at the Zhengzhou People's Bank of China branch, many background information point to government and PBOC local branch is trying to separate depositors who are depositing their own money versus depositors who collected other people's money to take advantage of higher interest rates at these banks. So some people will get back some money. And this distinction is highly important. If they're depositing their own money and they're under the assumption that they're just putting it with a bank and they're just getting slightly higher interest and they didn't sign up for any shady products, financial instruments, wealth management products, then I think this group of people should get some of their money back. Now, Henan's branch of China Banking and Insurance Regulatory and Local Financial Supervision Bureau says action plan on depositors coming soon. Again, some people will get some money back and some will be paid by central government and some by the local government. And now they just have to ascertain what is the procedure and protocol like. So the PBOC likely got that off-balance sheet term inserted in exchange for bankrolling the 50,000 per depositor. Of course, none of these are openly said. So there were 8 total banks in this situation. The ones in Anhui also got exactly some formatted note of 50,000 yuan initial payment for depositors. So burning the midnight oil is pretty common for local government, particularly when in the headlines. So, and like I've argued in my previous video, I don't think this will be taken lightly from the central government's perspective. And I don't care how many people they're going to mobilize. This is an important issue. A lot of people are keeping their eyes peeled on the developments of the situation there, so they better wake up their idea. With that, I'll see you in the next video, but more importantly, I will see you on the moon. Goodbye!